On today's episode of Cheating When Love Lies.
On this episode, we're going to talk about children of infidelity. It's not young children, minors, that I'll be speaking with today. It's an adult woman in her 50s who is still living out the trauma of having lived in a family where there was infidelity. This interview is incredibly heart-wrenching. I have never cried during one of my interviews. This was the first time. The pain and sorrow that this person, whom we're calling Erica, still experiences today is just heart-wrenching. I really appreciate her coming on and being so forthright and so honest. I know that this interview is going to help a lot of people whom I had no idea would still be suffering from an adulterous affair decades after it had occurred. Erica, thank you so much for being here, and welcome to Cheating When Love Lies.
Thank you.
So please give us a sense of your life growing up. Were you part of a traditional American family?
Yes, pretty typical, the kids, the white picket fence, married parents, dog. My father had a successful business, so we had more finances than probably, the average American. But we were, I would say, the typical family. And from the outside, people would sometimes call us, quote unquote, perfect, because my parents were nice, good looking, that sort of thing.
Were you an only child, or did you have brothers and sisters?
Yes, two, a brother and a sister.
How would you describe your family at the time when your story of infidelity came to the fore? There was a time when one of your parents was unfaithful. At what stage of life were you in when that occurred?
I was in college, so I didn't know it was happening at first either. So it was precluded by a separation of my parents, and then bits of the actual scenario kind of came out afterwards over the next 2 or 3 years, probably.
Why did you believe that your parents were separated when they were separated, and how old were you at that time?
I was in the middle of my college years, some of the personalities of my parents were very different, so that was the focus of the reason for the divorce. We could tell they were unhappy in a more intense way in, the couple of years, the lead up of the announcement of the separation.
So let's talk about those two things. You said your parents had very different personalities. How would you describe your mother versus your father?
Well, my mother was more, came from a different background, socioeconomically, educationally.
And what was that?
She was from another part of the country, from the West Coast. My dad was East Coast establishment, Ivy League. She was from a big school, focused on, she was an art major. He was an intense history major. She had not had any money growing up and didn't travel. He was worldly and traveled. And then she met him on the East Coast.
Do you feel like their different upbringings and their different origins played out in the family? Was that something that was evident to you or to an onlooker, that they came from very different worlds?
It would not be as much. I think it became manifested more in terms of interests. My mother was very good at adapting and learning and, assimilating. And she was very kind and had that sort of Midwestern appeal. But their interests grew more and more disparate, and they started doing things separate much at the time. My father really loved the outdoors, and my mother really loved having beautiful hair. And, she'd try, but it just wasn't her thing.
And so how did that manifest as you were growing up? Did it turn into we were all doing things together as a family, and then suddenly mom was going off doing her, cosmetic treatments and dad was out sailing or playing golf? I mean, how did it manifest this difference?
I think we did more when the kids were little, and then as we got older, they started just going into their areas of interest. But I think, again, from an underlying fundamental point of view, too, I guess it's, as you think about it in terms of their traumas or their psyches, or what they would be interested in or what they would go to sort of find their happy place, was very different. He was more of he liked to be quiet and alone, and she was more social. He could be social, but, there were fundamental differences, I think, in temperament and personality. They both loved their children very much, so that was a great unifying element, and they loved having fun, but it was a traditional marriage as well until she started wanting to have maybe some different things going on, or her, lover was sort of boosting her confidence to ask for some other things, or helping her realize what she maybe needed, or things like that.
Well, you just revealed that it was, in fact, your mother who had a lover. When did this become apparent to the kids, or when were you told that your mother had a lover?
Well, I think, of course, it was never told by my mother. It was up to me to confront her. Spitting with anger, yeah.
You confronted your mother. Can you tell us the story behind that? You're at college. How do you even have the knowledge to suspect that this affair is going on? Where does that knowledge come from?
I think it's almost so linked with lying and deceit. And I think that's, to me, such a base part, or such an essential part of affairs, is the essential need for the person to lie, I think, first to themselves, and then the lies that are created to the others, to their family members, to the husband, to friends, it just goes on and on. So, I think my instincts notice things in terms of behavior.
Like what?
Like, different behaviors about where she was at different times that were not usual, and then I would ask about it, and I'd get some bullshit answer, and I think instinctively I knew I was being lied to. So it was just like little pieces that you at first just say, oh, that doesn't add up. What is that?
Do you recollect a specific story, something that she told you where you started to question, this isn't really adding up?
Oh yeah, but I just don't know if I can say it. I'd see the car parked at the train station and say, oh, you were in New York City, but you didn't say anything. What were you doing there? And then the comment that came back was such a evasive bullshit answer that I just knew she was lying to me.
But you were at college, so were you having this conversation on the phone, or how did you even know that the car was at the station?
It was either in the summer when I came home on break, different little sporadic times. Yeah.
Were you the only one among your siblings who observed these kinds of behaviors?
I think my other siblings observed it, but we didn't talk about it with each other at the time.
Were you not close with them, or it was just too difficult to broach?
We did talk, but there was so much going on with the divorce and the family stuff, and
so you're noticing something such as your mother parking the car at the station. You're asking her what's going on. She's very evasive, and you start to get suspicious. Was there another incident where you felt those suspicions arise?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I can't give the specifics, but yes.
The semi-specifics. Was it a phone call you heard, a letter that she wrote?
No, it was, again, about kind of creating something that I was doing and then building into what I was doing and helping me and bringing me to that place then was a very convenient way for her to have time with the lover in his city.
Understood. Okay.
Yeah.
I understand that. How did that make you feel?
Oh, terrible. Angry. I mean, perplexed at first, almost like you're gaslighted. Did I imagine that right? But again, it's layered on a history of a parent who has been, again, loving in their way and in many ways that people would say is loving, but the parent has some deep issues, and they would come out and get picked up on at periodic points in my development. So this sort of, was a new level of it. And as an adult, suddenly myself, who, had boyfriends now and understood more about romance, it was not a good age to know about an affair.
And now, a word from our sponsor.
Hey guys, it's Brooke.
And Danielle from Gals on the Go podcast. It's very minimal change, but basically what I did...
Can we talk about the TikTok? Because I saw you deleted it, and I need to know that... I wasn't going to bring it up, but now that you're bringing it up... On our show, we talk about everything from college, lifestyle, to navigating your 20s and beyond. And there's always that quote that people say, like, if they like you, you'll know. If they don't, you'll be confused. But some people I don't know.
We hope you guys will join us every Wednesday for brand new episodes right here on Podcast One.
You described your mother as loving. Can you be more specific? What do you mean by loving? What behaviors did she manifest? What words did she say that enabled you at that time and even in the present to qualify her as loving?
She didn't love herself, so I think that's the base again, right? And as I have grown up, one of my major missions has been to understand the family patterns, or I haven't wished to, but it's just I've had to out of just necessity, and then it's become just part of how I've survived is to, I think, intellectually at first kind of understand our family pattern, our family history, and then how that impacted my parents and then impacted our upbringing in my adulthood.
But as you said that she was loving, was she there after school? Did she help you with your homework?
Yes, she would do. She was very much so. I think growing up, always very present. Sometimes, would cook the meals, like to cook. Chuck us into bed, pick us up from school. But there was yes. So on the face of it, of course, I was not neglected in the least. In fact, it sort of vacillated between intense love and then sort of pulling back, or kind of peppered by some weird behaviors that now I know are narcissistic hallmarks. But at the time, as a child, are disturbing and perplexing.
You described this time when you went to a location with your mother, and you stated, if I understand correctly, that you believe she took you to this specific location because it would be convenient for her to have her lover meet her at that location. You talked about how that made you feel, frustrated and angry. Did you confront her? Were you exposed to the lover? Did you see him at that location?
No, I did not. It was done. I was doing something else, and so it was she kind of folded it into a thing that was already happening for me. And during the day when I was doing my work, she was off doing her thing, and then very, again, though, evasive and lying and not forthcoming about her day. And again, I think I could feel it and sense it,
It's so really revelatory that almost every person that comes onto this podcast talks about intuition and a feeling. with all the apps, with all the private investigators, with all the resources that we have, we are always coming back to this notion of I can feel it. And that's what led you to question your mom at the train station or at this second location. Did you confront her then?
No.
Why not?
I didn't know then, and I probably didn't want to know. I really wanted to have my fun in college. You know, it was my turn to have my fun. So I didn't really want to address all of it. And, then I was told about it anyway down the line, so I didn't have to find out for myself. I don't know if I would have wanted to find out.
I'm going to come back to how you found out. I'd really like to delve deeply into that. But for the moment, let's stay in this space where you have this incredible intuition, which turned out to be right. You are angry, you feel deceived, but yet you're not in a position to confront your mother. Do you talk to anyone, or is this all deeply internalized?
It's more just sort of, just sort of small little wonderings or knowings that occurred amidst a sort of maelstrom of upheaval and emotion. So it was just sort of one piece of what was happening as the family was disintegrating and divorcing. So if maybe it had been in its own sort of arena, then that might have been it. But it was in the context of so many other issues and difficulties and traumas and upset and me wanting to just have fun and be a normal college girl, So it just sort of was in there. And then as I thought about it after, I would realize, oh, yeah, there it is, and it would add up. And I didn't like the feelings.
Who confirmed for you what your intuition had determined? Who told you that your mother had a lover?
My dad.
And how was that? Can you tell us how he told you and what state of mind he must have been in to have to reveal that truth to his child?
I know. Again, now as a, the parent's not supposed to say that. Nowadays it's not supposed to be told. And of course,
I question that, by the way.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think it's healthier for a family to understand truths when the time is right. I think that's the only way you do break these patterns. It's the only way you can free family members who might be more tormented or trapped by this family dynamic in which they've had no part in
Well, they've had a part, but they had no sort of role in the origination or how it unfolded.
Exactly.
They just had to be victimized.
That's right. They've been a part of this that they couldn't escape, but they didn't create this reality. And then it's being the choice is being thrust on them, and then they're going to have a choice whether they consciously try to part from it or they unconsciously absorb it, and then it's passed to the next generation, or it goes in and can make them sick. There's so many different elements to that.
Yes. Tell me about, please, how your father told you. We
were very close and very similar. So he told me, I think, in a moment of his upset.
On the phone, in person?
It's funny. I think I don't want to remember. I don't want to remember all the details. I just know he did. I can just kind of get general snippets. I guess that's a trauma memory, right, where you just have certain elements that come to you, but you...
So you don't recall, or you're uncomfortable talking about it?
No, I recall that he told me in sort of the tone of his voice.
And what was the tone?
He was distraught, angry and distraught.
Do you think that he had intended to tell you when he told you, or it was in a fit of frustration and or anger?
Yeah, I don't think it was an intentional, let's sit down, I have something to tell you kind of thing. It was in a fit of anger and frustration in general. Yeah, good question.
But you don't remember how? If it was on the phone, in person, you don't remember where you were?
I remember it was in person.
Okay.
I think it was in our home, but I'm really, it's spotty. not exactly, the memory you want to cherish and put in your hope chest.
Were you alone or with your siblings when he told you?
I was alone.
Did he tell you and all the kids, or was there a special relationship that you had with him where he felt that he could express this to you?
He had a good relationship with all the kids, but there were different elements to it. But he, I think my brother knew, but I don't know. It's my sister was a different story, but I can't get into that too much without compromising my privacy.
Do you remember how you responded when he told you?
Well, I mean, I was sad. At first, I thought of my father and his feelings. And was in the moment with him and his experience with it and sort of joined him emotionally. And then I think I had to sort of have it all hit me, but I don't remember again very specifically. Clearly, again, I didn't want to remember this one.
How did the conversation end? Did you reach out to your mother? Did you believe your father?
Oh, I believed him, and I think because of all the sort of little pieces leading up to it, it confirmed what I'd been, thinking.
So you never questioned your father when he told you?
No. He was always honest with me.
How soon thereafter did you see and or confront and or ask your mother?
I think first I was behaving very angrily towards her, alternatively probably avoiding her and being angry. And then it came out with her and I was just spitting with anger. Because my instinct has always been, it's as horrible as the truth is, it's still what you gotta know. I don't know. So at that point, I liked to know the truth, even though it's painful.
Did you ask her for very specific details? Did you refer to the times that you had made observations?
The affair, because an affair is so physical. Everybody has their images from movies or books, all the salacious stuff. It's the last thing you want to think about for your mother. Good God. Especially as you've just become a woman yourself, right? It's just really not somewhere you want to think about. And, if you've loved your mother and looked up to her, and it's a pretty big deal. And there's a lot to process with that.
It's interesting that you say, correct me if I misunderstood your just statement, it's an affair, it's physical. And that you have difficulty then, and clearly still at present, imagining your mother physically with someone else. Do you feel like the affair or her affair also had an emotional component? Something that was fulfilling her beyond just the physical?
Oh, yes. But of course, everyone, or at least for me, I went to the physical too, which is just, it's a pretty extreme way to end your marriage. But yes, there was an emotional component.
And how did you become aware of that, and what was it?
Well, again, it would be changes in her, like her personality, things she'd say. And then, eventually as this continued, she'd talk about him. And
after the truth came out.
Yeah. It never fully came out, and the family was fully addressed as to when it began, right? The whole divorce, the separation had to happen, then they had to get divorced, then she slowly tried to bring him around, into our lives.
So she never told you concretely what she had done. She never just said, I had an affair. So how did you find out what had happened?
My dad told me again when it probably started, and it made a lot of sense. So, yeah. No, I mean, she isn't good when you really want to get deep and specific about it. She's not, her forte is not acknowledging your feelings on something like this, that if she's maybe made a mistake or caused it, she's not going there.
Do you have an example of that?
Well, when I confronted her and it just, didn't really acknowledge it, didn't deny it fully, and just sort of tried to take it back to some of the basics, and then, how hard it was on the marriage for her, for this and that, and what my dad did, and this and that, and diversions, some other narcissistic tendencies that I've since come to understand. Mm-hmm. So again, I think in a way that is sort of a very symbolic sort of adult moment or capstone of my upbringing where, emotionally I would seek to be mirrored or heard or affirmed. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And instead it would be either just not registered or if the emotions were maybe too strong and made people uncomfortable, then, which I was a very emotive, loud, gregarious, no holds barred girl, tomboy girl. Mm. And, but if it made people, in particular my mother, uncomfortable or it didn't fit into the scenario, just ignore it, tamp it down, like whatever, Mm-hmm. So it sort of was, a piece of the existing pattern that had already been
established.
Established. And she would have done better getting more buy-in from me.
What do you mean by buy-in?
Quote unquote buy-in, like getting me to be more understanding maybe of where she was coming from, or maybe getting me to see it from a new way and maybe be open in the future to actually meeting this lover. Mm-hmm. If she had acknowledged what her actions had done to me and how it had affected the family.
That's a very, very powerful statement. I believe I heard you say that you would have been more open to meeting the lover had she acknowledged and validating how much the affair hurt you. Is that correct?
Yes, totally.
What could she have done to validate your feelings? What could she have said or done? What are the words that she could have spoken to make you feel, Erica, I'm heard?
If she could have heard what I'd said in the moment and repeated some of that back to me, if she could have said, I see how upset you are, and I've thought about what this would be like if my mother had done this. By the way, I think her mother had done this too. If she had said, I'm sorry it is this way, but here's my feelings and I ask for your forgiveness. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, would have been a good start. None of that was said, I'm realizing.
What did she say?
Justifying, she justified it, Bullshit justifications. It just did nothing for me. It just sent me off into it. Fucked me off even more, to excuse my French.
No, please. At that point, Erica, did you internalize this, or were you able to speak with your siblings or a professional or your father, or were you suffering this alone?
Oh, it became, major shame. Suddenly I was the scarlet letter. I mean, you should have just put me in, friggin', pilgrim hat and just seared that letter on me, or given me that, seared that scarlet letter, D.A. on my forehead, daughter of adulteress,
How? I'm not really understanding how you would have received the scarlet letter. What did you do that would have merited that?
I'm the daughter of a woman who had an affair, left a good man, that's just, being raised Catholic. First of all, when I got divorced, I thought, well, does that make me a retroactive bastard? If we're, and then, to be adultery of the woman in the Catholic Church. Wow, that's a big doozy. And so I just took that shame on left, right, and center. I carried that cross, I was just down there with that, all the shame that she didn't seem to have. I fucking took it on and then some.
And was it also thrust upon you by others in your community, Catholic or otherwise? Well, did people say things to you or do things that made you really carry that burden?
Yes, of course, again, with this slippery slope of what's truthful, what's not. Who knows, who doesn't know, right? It's almost better than like, all right, everybody, here it is. Okay, you thought we were the perfect family? Well, guess what? We're not. My mother's stupping some schmuck, and now here I am, and this is what it is. But some people knew. Some people either knew and didn't say, or some didn't know. Our close friends knew, and, a couple I respected said, well, we love your mother, but we don't respect her.
Oh, God.
And I said, yeah, I don't either. I don't blame you, and then one mother who sort of was in competition with my mother all along of the two beauties of the mothers of the kids in their school, different sort of kids and whatever. But these were sort of one mother, I think, felt competitive with my mother who was a beauty and this and that and kind of wanted to like her. But this mom had gotten divorced, and then she'd ask, very pointed questions, at the time, and then all the way afterwards, why didn't she ever get married? Is she still with that guy? It just would make me friggin' score. My skin would crawl. I would be so disgusted, ashamed, upset. I'd find it unseemly of the mother to ask me. I could see through to that mother's own weaknesses, and her ego faulted sort of viewpoint and why she would ask me and then make me uncomfortable about it again. And, I would sort of evade them or I didn't know how to respond to that stuff. But that also was really, really a byproduct that I just disdained.
And how old were you when this mother is asking you? What's the age disparity here? Is this a 40-something-year-old woman coming up to the 20-something-year-old college student, asking her about her mother's adulterous affair?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would be in more vague sort of quote-unquote polite terms, starting when I was in my 20s all the way through my 40s. Several mothers did this, or other women in the community, or our friend, parents' friend group. Maybe because my mother didn't talk about it. I don't know. I'd alternate between being just ashamed and kind of mumbling to sort of almost getting mad about it to avoiding them. It just really got, that one was a major sore spot, to say the least, and yeah.
Did you ever retaliate or sort of bite back at any of these comments?
Well, of course, I agree with them. It's not like I felt suddenly real proud of my mom. It's not like I'm going to have a parade and just on every Mother's Day bring out the cards and the cake. Hey, I'm so glad you had an affair and you had a great sex life and broke up the family. Way to go. Mm-hmm.
You met her lover. What kind of relationship, if any, did he attempt to pursue with you?
Well, he was still married, and then I knew that he was still married by some questions, and then was like, "What are you doing? You've ruined our family. Okay, you got divorced. You've caused untold upset and upheaval, and this joker is still married." Mm-hmm. And I said, "Do you even know it?" And she sort of played both sides, like what she wasn't sure. And I'm like, this guy is totally married the way these behaviors are. And I didn't even know. I've never dated married men. I always found it repugnant. Mm-hmm. Never have. But, and so I think that piece is one of the major pieces that, again, to me, I think it sort of highlighted her choice or her feeling from her generation that women then have to take more sacrifice and be the fallen woman who then gets divorced, even though my dad would have stayed married to her, unbelievably so.
You think so?
Maybe for the family again. It's a whole other story of stuff. But
did he say that, or you're just making that assumption based on his commitment to the family?
Yeah, he was so committed to the family, and there was all this back and forth, and then my mom regretted it. Dear God, at least if we're going to do this, be clear, God damn it, with everything. Don't give us this back and forth and keep us in limbo, with these emotional torments of yours, for God's sake.
So the lover was still married?
Yes.
Was he talking about getting divorced?
Oh, he'd talk to her about it. He'd tell her a whole bunch of sweet stories. He was such a good talker. That's what he did for a living. What he did for a living also coincidentally disgusted me. He was immoral. He had no moral guidance. He was like bereft of morality. So to me, it was very typical. It just sort of completed the picture I had of him anyway.
And how did your mother respond to that? Did she not care that he was still married? Did she not have aspirations of, even if not marrying him, at least being with him in some sort of legitimized way?
It went back and forth. One minute he gave her kind of a ring, but then he didn't. She kind of thought maybe she wanted to get married. Then she'd say, oh, maybe I don't. And I never know. She wasn't true to me about it, and maybe she wasn't true to herself. And honestly, it wasn't something I really wanted to get into deeply anyway, because I didn't want to be around the guy, because every time I was, it just highlighted that this thing was still going on. And frankly, it was like we were the lower caste, to quote the Indian caste system. I felt like, well, here we are. My mom put us in the lower caste. We were Brahmins, and now we're have gone down 2 notches in importance because, I guess our lives aren't as important as his, because his kids are being, not that it's good what he did either, lying to his wife, lying to his kids, having a mistress, outright mistress. But, he didn't blow up his family, but she sure as hell just came in with the napalm, just took down all the bridges. And, we had to go through complete, Chernobyl. It's like I'm literally going nuclear with my imagery.
Did his wife ever find out?
I don't know. I suspect so. I mean, he wasn't any great shakes either. That's the other thing. I didn't think the guy was good looking. I mean, what the hell? But as I'm learning now as an adult, it's so much about the person, themselves, and their past and whatever. And this is all now crystal clear in terms of my mother not feeling good about herself and then using men to feel better about herself. But then it's just, this whole cycle of things. So I've been able to understand it more, at least from that perspective.
I want to come back to that, but I'd also like to understand the practicalities of it. Your family's been blown up, as you said. This lover is still married to his wife. Your mother remains in some way, shape, or form as the on or off mistress. What's happening on Christmas? What's happening on birthdays? What's it like at these moments when families typically come together? What was that like for you at that point?
Well, my mother wouldn't, be with him until a couple of years after or something, when he supposedly was coming to one meal or whatever, and he kind of it was almost like Mrs. Doubtfire, kind of running in, big panic from whatever, and then having to run out again, all these bullshit excuses and la-di-da. So usually he wasn't around, and, in the beginning we had separate holidays, and then sometimes my parents were good about getting along and being with other family members. It sort of varied, or we'd visit somebody else, whatever. Holidays became more difficult and challenging and sad, of course. But luckily he did not sort of interject into those much, and she didn't just suddenly disappear for no reason either, at least. If she said she was going to host, Christmas Day or whatever, she would, so that's good.
So when she left the family, I'm assuming she went to go live near him, to be within proximity to him.
Yeah.
Did you ever tell him anything? Did you confront him? Did he ever stay over at the house or anything when you were there?
Oh, not our house, no.
No. Okay.
Or hers, not when I was there. No, okay. I think he knew full well how I felt. He knew. It was no, I couldn't, I'm not going to swallow that one down, thank God. So I wish I'd had confronted him more, but not really. I think it was more through my behavior, lack of what I said. Again, my tone, my feeling. I might have confronted him, but I don't think so. I think I wasn't at all receptive or friendly.
Were there incidences where you did things that were really...
Interesting you say that. There was one time when I saw some piece of clothing, and I have to admit, in a passive-aggressive way, I did defile that piece of clothing, and I know it's base.
How? What did you do to the clothing?
It's base. I don't remember exactly, but I made sure that really nice shirt was never going to be worn again.
Do you think he knows that you did that?
Probably.
Do you think that you intended for him to know that you did that?
Maybe. I just was so fucking mad. I just didn't care. And that wasn't like me. Boy, was I the good girl. I was polite. I was such a good little girl. So nice and polite and thoughtful. You know, I got rid of some of that when I started living in New York, thank God. Yeah, so
That'll do it to you.
Yeah, but, yeah. And, you know, but it felt, I think because I did feel so powerless, right, to have my life. And I'd had revenge fantasies of letting those boys know. Like, you know what?
What boys?
His boys and his daughter. Like, why should we be the ones to have to take this all on the chin? And they're just blithely going about their lives in, you know, happy ignorance about what an ass their dad is.
Let's talk about that. You called it a revenge fantasy. Gives it a very sort of unsavory connotation.
Well, unsavory behaviors and actions create unsavory thoughts in very good, kind, high moral people. Takes you right down into the mud, doesn't it?
Well, that's what I'd like to discuss. Is that really taking someone down in the mud, or is it justified? Would there have been a justification if you picked up the phone and called them?
Oh, definitely. I just don't think I wanted to do it, or I had the confidence or the courage. But I also didn't want to hear about the love and this and that, right? They would just get so gross about it. You know, it's true love. I don't know, whatever bullshit, pat shit they say. Because to me, you can't have true love when you got an affair and you're lying all the time. You're lying to yourself. You're lying to your family. It's hard to have a beautiful love coming out of that one, in my opinion.
So you feel like you didn't live out these quote-unquote revenge fantasies. I mean, there's a world in which we could call that I'm going to communicate truths to other people, right? Mm-hmm. And you feel that you didn't do that because you, according to what you said, lacked confidence. Thinking about that today, if you could turn the clock back, would you or could you react in the same manner? What would you change?
I think I knew I wasn't equipped to deal with this guy who was a professional sweet talker and manipulated people. And I knew that in some level in terms of the way he behaved. I couldn't have given it a name or identified it, but I knew again that that's what it was and who he was. And I knew that if I'd tried to go head to head verbally, I would have had a huge smackdown, and that would have taken more of an emotional toll than I was ready to do. And I didn't need to do that for my own emotional healing or whatever. That to me was not necessary. It wasn't a need.
And this is a sentiment you had at that moment, not in retrospect, because that is extraordinarily insightful and powerful for a young woman in her 20s to have thought out the sequence of events and what the repercussions would have been so carefully. For you to have that type of insight in your 20s is incredible.
Really?
Yes.
I don't think that, but I knew it. I had to be protective. I wasn't going to confront him or her about it because I think I just knew it wouldn't have done anything, right? If
Well, we don't know that.
Yeah, and obviously as a 20-something, I think I would have erroneously thought something I could have done maybe could have changed things, but as I know now, of course not. But I'm glad I didn't try to do anything that would have made it worse for me, or they would have humiliated me further and added to the shame that I already felt that they clearly did not feel.
Mm-hmm. The shame that they inflicted upon you, and that you internalized.
Yeah, which I wish, again, I hadn't taken it on. And, you know,
yes.
But I knew I had it, and I will say I had a wonderful epiphany when I looked at a friend whose mother also had an affair. And I really respected this friend and watched as they went about their life and their comportment and sort of the joy they had in life, and thought, they're not feeling shame about their mother. They're not hanging their head low. They're living their life, and they're sort of in their present. I think that's when I started to see, because my mother was very enmeshed, right? Very unhealthy boundaries, permeable boundaries, right? Completely lack of any boundary, particularly for my emotional reality. So I grew up with that sort of enmeshment, and so her shame was my shame, although one of my feelings never went back on her. She didn't take on my feelings, except, she'd say, if you're unhappy, then I'm unhappy. But for this friend, I was able to see, okay, maybe I don't have to take on this shame, because it's not my shame.
No.
But it took a while to differentiate myself from it, And again, family shame, let's face it, though, in history. I mean, let's look at the Taliban. Look at in Saudi Arabia when a daughter who's caught kissing is, I don't even know the word, punished by the father, stoned to death, right? I mean, look at the extremes that are happening these days right now. That, obviously there is still a lot to that sort of family shame, and particularly brought on by the woman. Again, the double standard reigns supreme. The male double standard, he's a good old guy, he couldn't help it, he was so virile, blah, blah. The women threw themselves at them. But when the woman has the affair, there is no leeway. Not that I think women, anybody should get leeway, but the women get it twice as bad, and same, I think. And so I thought for the family, I felt that I perceived it. It was a very sexist time when I grew up. I mean, come on.
At what point in your life did you meet this friend who was inspirational to you, that showed you the other side of how one could respond to a parent's affair? Was it right after it had happened in college or later on in life?
No, it was a friend I knew from growing up. And then as you mentioned this, I remember I had a boyfriend in college whose mother had an affair. And we talked about it too. And he also was not shamed. But, yeah. So
and they were the ones that were helpful. Because at the time, I mean, we're around the same age. People weren't running to therapy, right? It wasn't like everybody ran to the therapist.
Yeah.
Did you have the benefit of professional help, or were these people really instrumental?
No, I watched them and modeled and just also talked to them about their perspectives a little bit. And then, I didn't go to therapy till then. Oh, yeah, I had a, depression in my mid-20s after I ended my relationship with a serious boyfriend who was very devoted to me and would never cheat on me. And that was, a major piece of why I dated him, But, yeah, they were helpful. But it's, these realizations are such a piece of... I think moving through it and then developing and moving on.
Erica, you have been so emotive, and we all can feel just how difficult and painful this experience that was decades ago still appears to be for you now. Do you feel that as a child of infidelity, that you can ever get past the shame, the sense of voicelessness, of not being heard, of not being validated, the anger and the frustration? It's decades later. What would you say to people like you that have been children of infidelity? Will you ever be free and rid of this intense sorrow that is so very clear to all of us?
Well, I think when you visit it again, it comes back up, and so it's more real. But yeah, I mean, hey, you're a girl, your mother who you looked up to, it does pretty much one of the worst things. I don't know, infidelity and then murder are pretty close hand in hand. I guess stealing is the next one. To me, they're pretty in there, Nowadays, maybe it's less so, but, I think I wouldn't say no, I'll never be free of it. There are scars on our family that came through this eruption and then disruption.
What can happen to free you somewhat of this sorrow? Is it your mother coming to talk to you? Is it your being in a community with people saying, this happened to me, like your friends, and I don't carry the shame? What could it be for people like you that are still intensely affected by their parents' affair?
Well, the thing for me is forgiveness. Right? I didn't want this thing to happen. I didn't want what had happened, what it meant, and who I saw as a consequence of it as my mother. I didn't want the feelings it made me feel or the way it made me behave. And as I've learned and as I've gone through life, the hardest thing for me to do is to forgive. I think I'm about 80% there, but it's a hard one. And as I've looked into forgiveness and talked to people and therapists and friends who have forgiven, And I read about Mary and Pearl, of course, which is the most massive example I can almost think about as a role model. Forgiveness is the it's the key to everything, self-love and forgiveness. So I'm getting close. Remembering all this is definitely, I don't go back there and remember it very much anymore, which I'm happy to say I don't go there. But I've been working and really and doing a lot and finding joy in forgiveness in this and a way to forgive, because ultimately they say that, forgiveness of someone else is then freeing you, right? It's really forgiveness to give. It's a gift you give yourself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Has your father forgiven your mother?
No, he kind of is. The whole fallout of this resulted in him remarrying a tough person, and then he passed away not so long after that. So that's also part of the pain, But again, I go to my spiritual place and think about what was meant to be and what we're supposed to learn, and
What was meant to be, and what are you supposed to learn?
Well, I believe he was meant to die when he did. I felt it again, and again, how little we really do control in our lives or the lives of people we love, and so I love him very much. I miss him, but I'm also very lucky I had him. And I'm lucky I am who I am. So I gotta just,
Erica, what would your father tell you if he could see you right now?
Oh, he'd say to forgive. Forgive. I won't, forgive. Not that I will emulate her or, again, respect her, as the friend said, but just try to forgive. Look at it from another side, another, viewpoint of love and whatever, and be free of this, be free of it. I don't like this kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. How do you think it has or can impact your own children? This is so alive in you. How has it passed on, if at all, to your own children?
Well, when my son lied to me for the first time in second grade, my reaction was overreactive. It triggered in me the feeling of someone I love and trust lying to me, which is one of the worst feelings I have experienced. Mm-hmm. And the little guy got quite an earful about it. And he knows that, you don't lie to mom. Lying to me is just really, and I'm learning there's a difference between not sharing something or being private and then lying. Mm-hmm. So I'm a big believer in teaching them that and telling them about how, we want to be truthful, and especially truthful to who you are and your feelings, so that when they cry or they needed, affirmation, I would just say, okay, I know, I would go and comfort them and kiss the boo-boo. It's okay. I'm sorry you hurt your knee. Oh, what do you think? And I would just acknowledge it in the moment. Mm-hmm. They'd get through it fast. They'd be up and running in 10 seconds. But I would notice other people who were raised the way I was. Oh, you're fine. Get up. Get over it. You're all right. Don't worry about it. You'll be okay, for God's sake. No, the kid is sitting there crying, needing something from the parent, needing to be mirrored. And the minute that mirroring happens, they are fine. But they need that in the meantime to know their feelings are real and learn their feelings. So that became an informative way of parenting. And it soothed me to soothe them, And so that was a beautiful outcome of that.
May I make the leap by saying maybe that is a blessing in what happened to you, that you became someone who was so aware of the need for mirroring and affirmation, that maybe had you not been through this experience, you never would have had that learning?
Definitely. I'd say so. There it is. I always look. Thank you for that. Mm-hmm. It's Jillian. It's great to always look for the beautiful things that can arise out of really tough situations. And that is one of them for sure.
In this last part, we touched on it earlier. Should kids be told the truth? There's cheating. And then when I say kids, let's give it some sort of parameters. Not less than teens, 12, 13, 14 and above. And of course, it depends on the child. It depends on the environment. But we're speaking in general terms. Let's switch the situation to kind of give you an emotional break. There's a man that's cheating on his wife. The children are like you. They notice Dad's behavior is changing. Dad has lost weight. Dad is dressing differently. Dad is coming up with excuses why the car is at the train station at a time it never ordinarily was. Children are having questions. They're making observations. They are you. How should we address them?
I think at some point there should be honesty. And the parents have to get themselves figured out before they can be honest with the kids, or at least understand a little more to it, but also say, at least be as honest as they can be in that moment, given the age of the child, and then they can build on that later and say, yes, there is a difference. I see it too. I understand. It's nothing about you. I think you have to always depersonalize it for the children so they don't internalize it and think it's their fault, and again, that they can change it. It's tricky, though, with telling the truth, because if there's one family member in the family dynamic who wants to tell the truth, but everybody else wants to keep it a secret, that brings out a whole bunch of other things in terms of the scapegoat of the family, and what can happen because nobody else wants the truth, because the family structure now is built on this lie. And
Let's do something I've done and I find to be very effective. Let's role play. I'm the child. I've witnessed the circumstance I've just told you with the father. I'm a boy. I'm 14 years old. Dad, how come you don't come home anymore on Friday nights till really late? And I saw you in the car with a woman that wasn't Mom. What were you doing?
Well, I'd love to think that Dad would say, son, I made a mistake, but I doubt it. I think the son should be acknowledged. You're right, there have been changes. I've been acting strange. I'm glad you've noticed. Thank you for talking to me.
Why are you doing that? What was going on? Who was she?
I'm afraid to think that most men would probably lie because they wouldn't be prepared for that emotional, to address it right then and there. They'd want to kind of get ready for it.
I agree with you, but I'm asking you, as someone who is so deeply entrenched in the emotional repercussions of this adulterous affair, we're writing the script right here and now. Would you write the next line to be, son, I'm unhappy. I've got to be honest with you. What you saw did happen. I was kissing this woman, and I'm sorry. Is there a world in which that could be the next line in the play?
Oh, boy, I sure wish there were. I sure do wish. But, of course, the parent would know that would begin a whole chain of events telling, I don't know, again, see, their house of lies.
Well, should the child bear that burden?
No.
That the parent would then have to confront the lie?
No, well, in an ideal world, the parent would friggin' restrain themselves and not do it.
But it's happened already. I want to finish this scene.
No, they should say, I thank you for bringing that out, son, and at least acknowledge the son. And then depending on who the person is, be as honest as they could. God willing, they'd be as honest as they could, and don't put it on the innocent child anymore.
Put what on that innocent
Take your
child?
lumps of coal. You made your reality. You made your bed, to quote that same old cliche. You made your bed, now lie in it, guy. But I think, again, unless the person is someone who is in touch with himself and emotionally courageous, and if chances are, if they're having an affair and behaving like that, and behaving that recklessly in the context of the marriage and around the child, I would assume they probably are not prepared to do that because that's not who they are.
Sure, and I agree with you. I affirm what you're saying. I'm just very interested in this discourse about how we behave with children. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a therapist. I'm just a mom and a woman. But we talk so much about gaslighting, the impact it has. We talk so much about truth, the importance of it. Are we really allowed to carve out a specific time period in which those are no longer relevant? Now, of course, I'm not talking about very young children who may not even understand what a lover or a mistress or an affair. Right, so that's off the table. But once these children who are exposed to so much through music, through television, through movies, they know what these types of relationships are about and what they are. How truthful and how forthcoming must we be? And if we are not, in order to quote unquote protect them, what are the ramifications? I think that I'm seeing them here today with you. Just something to consider. I'm not proselytizing this. I'm not advocating this. I'm offering it up as something to consider. And I'd love to hear from the Cheating When Love Lies listeners, their point of view. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much.
It was brilliant and insightful, and I really appreciate your willingness to go to a place that was very uncomfortable, because it's absolutely going to help very, very many people.
I hope it does. If it helps one person, it makes me feel better.
Thank you, Erica. As difficult as it was, and it truly was, to hear today's story, I get them when I hear from you. Please continue to write in and share your experiences, because I know that today we've been able to help someone out there who's coping with dealing with infidelity that they experienced in their youth. So share your stories, and perhaps we can talk about something that's affected you, and we can help someone else pay it forward. Thanks for listening.